Good morning, everybody, or maybe it's good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are, or maybe you're watching the replay. So let's just say good day. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Natalia Hansen. I am the marketing coordinator for the Summit for Animals, Humane Canada Summit for Animals. Let me tell you real quick what this is about. The Summit for Animals is Canada's largest and really only conference for the animal welfare and sheltering sector. It brings together over 400 people from all corners of the animal welfare, advocacy, and sheltering world. So, we are doing this series of live streams with some of our conference speakers so you can get to know them and you can have an idea of what they're going to talk about. It's basically like a sneak peek we're giving you. So, today we're going to talk about something that I personally think is of interest to nonprofits because Humane Canada, we are a non for profit and we rely heavily on donations and major gifts and grants and fundraising in general. So, our guest today is going to talk about just that. So, we are going to be talking about with Jenny. She is the founder of Chavender. So, let me tell you about who Jenny Mitchell is first, and then we'll bring her on. And by the way, if you're watching live, please type a comment, a question. The idea is that we interact with you as we do this. So, Jenny Mitchell is an executive coach, a podcaster, and a published author who is on a mission to help people have more meaningful conversations. She's a lifelong learner who holds an executive coaching degree from Royal Roads University, a certified fundraising executive designation, and a doctor of musical arts from SUNY Stony Brook in piano performance. That is such an interesting career. Jenny spent 10 years as a professional fundraiser, helping charities and nonprofit organizations raise millions of dollars to make the world a better place. But it wasn't raising money that was her passion, it was the people. And that's actually what we are going to talk about today. We are going to go beyond raising money, but really connecting with people through strategic questions. So let's bring her on. Hi, Jenny.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us from Ottawa.
My pleasure. We're supposed to get a huge dump of snow, so I'm looking forward to talking about something other than the weather, Natalia.
I know, right? I chatted with Dr. Kwan Stewart last week. He's our keynote speaker for the conference, and he was joining us from San Diego. And I think unknowingly he was rubbing it in our faces. I'm joining from sunny San Diego. Most people watching in cold Canada, but hey, it's winter. It
Mhm.
is what it is. All right. So, Jenny, as I said in the intro, you are speaking at the Summit for Animals for the first time, but you are not new to the speaking world. You have a
Mhm.
podcast, you've spoken at several conferences, but this is your first time speaking at the summit. So tell us how you're feeling about that, real quick.
Well, I'm quite excited. I am working with a colleague, Kaylee Goringer from the Calgary Humane Society, and she will be joining me to add sort of different perspectives, different flavors to the presentation in the hopes that it'll really be practical for folks, Natalia. That's really my goal, is to provide context and my expertise, but also make it really applicable. And on a personal note, we are lifelong dog owners. I don't think I'll ever not have a dog in my house. And we added a cat during the pandemic, so I'm all in. As far as the mission goes, like, sign me up, Natalia.
Love that. Thank you. And yes, I know you in your workshop at the conference, you're going to talk about how Calgary Humane Society, where Kaylee works. By the way, side note, Kaylee is part of our conference program committee. So we have a group of people who volunteer their time, their skills, their knowledge to help us put together the conference schedule, which is really the heart and soul of the conference, of course. And I think that people really like to hear about those case studies or those examples, because I think one thing is to say the theory and, according to this research, et cetera, et cetera. But when you actually put it into action and you can say this organization or this person achieved this by doing that, it's almost like more encouraging or more inspiring, and it shows people how it's done, right? Is that your experience too?
Yeah, and I really think major gifts, like what we're talking about with transitional questions, is helping people see their connection to the mission. And that sounds so airy fairy, Natalia, right? Unless you've experienced it yourself, you've had a mentor that walked you through it. And so we're going to kind of take some journeys with some donors to explain how they first connected to the organization, what kind of activities and actions we took as development associates to make certain key touch points happen, what the invitation, notice I use the word invitation instead of ask, what the
Mm,
invitation might look like, the focus on how the donor can be the solution and helping them see their role rather than telling them their role. That's one of the things I really focus on in my
mm.
presentations. It's worth repeating. And people don't like to be sold to, people like to purchase, people like to buy. And so in fundraising terms, what that means is they don't like to be told how to give. They like to be invited in. And what we do is we sow the seeds, we make sure that the soil is cultivated, we create experiences and moments where people can see that they can do good in the world through their philanthropic contribution. And that is a skill and it can be learned.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you're saying it can be learned because a lot of people feel uncomfortable asking for money. And you touched on something that actually is going to be my first question because your session, you are going to talk about transitional questions and how to ask the right transitional questions. And for anyone who's watching, what do you mean by that? What are transitional questions?
So when I it's funny, when I started teaching this, I realized I had to explain what I do. So often, we get natural. I learned on the job, I figured things out, I watched people. And then when I had to kind of analyze what I was doing in order to explain it or teach it, it became very like a game almost, Natalia. There are three circles in any conversation you're going to have. And even your listeners today on this restream, I hope this can add value to your day. There's the intro, there's the middle part, which I call like the meat and potatoes, or maybe you say the beans and lentils. And then there's the conclusion, right? There's the ending and the next steps. And I often say the way you handle those transitions from the facts and information into the main part of the conversation, that's one transition. And the second transition is from this moment that you've had, this magical conversation you've had, into the next steps and expectations. Those two things together will determine the quality of your interaction. And so that's what I mean by transitional questions is questions that invite people to go deeper. And remembering that it is our job as philanthropy officers, or even for some of your folks that are technicians on the floor and at
Mm,
the associations, when you have that moment with that person that is just so in love with that new puppy or that old puppy, because I know there's lots of animals that are not just
yeah.
puppies at the shelters. When that moment happens, to be able to say, would it be okay, right? That open-ended question, would it be okay if I shared your name and contact information with our one of our people in the office so that we could share your story? Or, would this be a year you'd like to make a meaningful gift to the animals? Could you share with me more, the kinds of things that you're passionate about when it comes to philanthropy? Do you notice, Natalia, they're all very soft. They're all very open-ended. That's something I talk a lot about. And it doesn't have to be icky. That's really one of the messages I want to
Mm.
give. But handling those transitions is the most important component, and you can learn how to do it. And now that I've said it, everybody listening to this restream will realize that every conversation you have today, any meeting you're in, always has those three pieces.
Interesting. And we just don't think about it, right? Like we just talk. We don't start a conversation with like, hang on, first step. Okay, two. No, we just do it. So I think the goal would be for us to learn this and just have it like embedded in our conversations because it also needs to be natural, right? Like we don't pull out a notebook and like, oh, hang on, I'm on the first part. What is the next question? Like, no, that's just not cool. That's awkward. And I think you just said something very important, Jenny, and it's that you're talking about, for example, at humane societies, as PCAs, a lot of the times the people working in development, in marketing, fundraising events are behind the scenes. They're in an office. And that first line is the adoption staff, the kennel attendant, the volunteer manager, etc. And I think it's important for them to also be trained on this. So who do you think would be the right audience to sit in on your workshop? Is it only professional fundraisers, or do you see value in somebody like, let's say, a kennel attendant or an adoptions counselor to sit in this workshop?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to issue a challenge, Natalia. I am going to challenge folks to attend this session, especially if it makes them just a little bit uncomfortable, because this is this session. I mean, there's technical aspects to it, but I actually think this is one of the most human, natural conversation is something we all do. And if I can help some of our practitioners on the other side, right, like you said, in the kennels, help feel more comfortable talking about giving generously, Kaylee and I will have done our work. And I want to just highlight that the nobody on that side of the equation needs to ask for money. The only thing those folks need to do is to open a conversation. And I want to highlight that giving is actually a very cathartic and generous and a feel good experience. I'll tell you a short story. I love it. Somebody's accepted my challenge on LinkedIn. I love it. This is awesome. And I will tell you that the week I adopted my dog from a shelter, um, I was just on cloud 9 walking down Bank Street, if you know Ottawa, and
Yes.
and I have the best dog. His name is Laddie. He's a Catahoula. Anybody know what a Catahoula is? A southern breed. He's a nut bar, but we love him. So I'm walking on Bank Street, and this young person comes up to me with a little portfolio, and she says, "Hi, I'm from," and honestly, it's the Ottawa Humane Society that I'm a donor to. And she said, "Would you consider,
Mm.
becoming a monthly donor?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And I was like the happiest person on the planet to be able to make that monthly gift that I've done. And I will let you know, he's 10 years old. I'm still a donor. That number has increased over the months, and
Of course.
I was so happy doing it. That's what I really want people to understand. It's not this grind of asking for money. It's actually quite a wonderful, magical thing to connect with people over their values.
I love that. I love that you're showing it as a gift and an opportunity rather than like, oh, I have to ask this person for money. I have to ask them to increase their gift because then it can get awkward. And I think a lot of it is getting into the mindset, right? Like shifting that mindset of, oh, I gotta do it to like I get to do it. That's beautiful. And when we were going over the first question just before, you gave some examples already, I feel, of maybe some transitional questions of is it okay if I give your name to our marketing department so they can share your story? So I'm assuming that's an example of a transitional question. Is there another one or another ones? Although we don't want to give too much away because the goal is that people come to the conference and listen to your workshop. But is there one that you can think of that has been particularly effective in uncovering a donor's core values?
Yep. I love it. And I just have to send a shout out to the Catahoula leopard dogs. Woo, woo, woo. But back to the topic because I'm focusing here, Natalia. So, another good example of a transitional question is making overt something that was covert. Let me explain what I mean. Sometimes I find the most obvious questions and the most simplest questions are the best. Natalia, we've had a great conversation. I've really enjoyed learning. The opening section is almost facts and figures, where I'm from, how I'm connected to the organization. Would it be okay if we dived into your connection to the mission now, right? Or I'd like to go a little deeper. I'm wondering, tell me how animals have made a difference in your personal life. I know for myself, like I'll often use the phrase for myself, use yourself as an example.
Mm, mm,
I know for myself, animals are a huge part of my mental health. Is that the same for you? Flip. So
mm.
making specific what you're talking about, opening it up very transparently. One of the things I'd like to talk about today is your giving. Would that be a topic we could talk more about? Could we, are there other organizations that you support? And I'd love to know what makes them part of your philanthropic goals for this year. Like I think making overt and specific the things that you are trying to get to. I find that's actually a great technique.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. And you know what? I love the example you gave of like, oh, for me, my animals are part of my mental health. How about you? Like you're opening up the floor for them. And I went to college for two things: one, veterinary assistant, and then for public relations. And I'll never forget one of my teachers told me, it's just one of those things where you pay so much money to go to college, and then the littlest things is that what stays with you. And he said, people's favorite subject of conversation is themselves. And even more when it's their animals, right? I could talk for hours about my animals. We could do a live stream on my animals, and I'm sure on yours as well.
100%. And I just see in the chat here the discussion about curiosity. And I find that's a big,
Yeah.
let's call it a transition between fear of talking about money versus just being curious about people. And that really makes
Mhm.
a big difference, the curiosity. And here's the secret sauce. Anybody who works with animals or we already have like a animals have an implied way of communicating with us, right? They don't need words. We sort of pick up on their energy and their vibe. So I often find people in the animal world, I would often say social services as well, have an
Mm.
innate ability for this, which is I think sometimes what makes it harder for them because they're particularly worried about insulting or saying the wrong thing, Natalia. And so I really want to kind of debunk that and remind everyone that there's no wrong thing. If you're asking open-ended questions and you're curious and truly listening and picking up on things, usually the conversation deepens organically and naturally. And so it's
Yeah,
not as hard as we think it is.
for sure. And I'm sure it goes so natural and starts flowing that maybe it gets to the point of like, okay, we need to take a break now. It can keep going and going, right? So it can
Oh
go from being
yeah.
something awkward of like, oh, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable to, hey, this is just flowing so naturally. Honestly, like that's how I feel like what we're doing right now, for example.
Yeah.
Like this isn't
Yep.
necessarily scripted. We're interacting with the comments as well.
Yep.
And it's just flowing. Time goes by so fast. Okay, I
Oh,
love
so
that. I want to
uh,
switch something to something that I know you're going to talk about in your session as well. And it's donor archetypes. What is this about?
Yes. So again, when I was trying to figure out how to explain things to people, I always found case studies were really important for me. So I'm a active learner. I like to touch, I like to feel, I like to do. If you talk to me too long, I'm like out. You know what I mean? Like I'm just out of there. So I was wanted to have a practical exercise that people could sort of dive into. And nobody likes role playing, but role playing really does work. So, spoiler alert, yes, there is role playing. Spoiler alert, you will be great at it, I promise. So that I've created 4 donor archetypes, and we could tweak these depending on the profiles at your own humane society. So, and I know it's not just humane societies, but there's the generous. I think one of them is called the generous humanities couple. The folks that give to Oxfam and give to all the international aid and have wonderful animals. Like how you approach them, what kind of language you use versus let's call him Bobby Spotify. Somebody who's like a Spotify tech agent and has a very different understanding of time and pacing. So we're going to practice with these archetypes to connect with them in a way that works for them, and I think this is a really important learning tool. And I also would encourage people to practice role play stuff before they go out into the field. If you're feeling weird about a conversation or whatever, pull a colleague aside and kind of role play it or test it out. It'll What it helps is with the mirroring of your brain. Like I'm an executive coach. That's another part of what I bring to the table. The athletes have been doing this for ages, Natalia. I'm a huge tennis nut. The athletes talk to themselves. They say, well, the Australian Open is this court is the same size as it was last week when I was practicing. It's the same size that it was at the US Open in New York City. So I don't have to worry. The court is always there for me. So there's a bit of a mindset shift that happens there. The visualization is important. And excuse me, knowing that you will be okay. And I would even use the word safe and comfortable. Is very
Mm.
important when we're practicing and getting better at our skills.
Love that. Oh, that's so cool. And I love that you really are talking about that mindset because honestly, a lot of it has to do with it, right? I know a lot of people may be like, oh, come on. No, that really does. Like, think about it in our personal lives, right? When we wake up feeling like, okay, today's going to be a good day, we are most likely going to have a good day. But if we wake up like, I hate my life, then that's when you fight traffic. That's when someone's rude to you. It's like almost like I do believe that we attract a lot of what happens to us with our thoughts. So it's interesting that we can apply this concept to fundraising because
Well, and
I
I would
don't
even
know
go
people have
yeah,
thought about that.
I will go a step further and I will say that the research supports what you just said, Natalia. The research on neuroscience says that when you look for things that are opportunities, you see them. And those neural pathways actually start to be reinforced. And when you plan for the worst, you will find that as well. And so be careful what you don't have to. One of my favorite quotes is, you don't have to believe everything you think. So this
Yep.
idea that we can
Hmm.
control, and in our brains there are something called mirror neurons, and I think animals obviously have this in spades, right? We know when we look at a dog's eyes how that makes us feel. We Endorphins are released. There's chemicals that happen. Our mirror neurons in our brain are looking for connection with other people, and we know, but from the research, we're making decisions based on, I think it's like what, 30% is what you say, 60% is how you look, and then the rest is on gut instinct. So it really
Hmm.
helps us to remind us that your intentions and the way you think about your success in the world and your abilities as a fundraiser actually do affect your outcomes. So if you're dragging your feet to talk about this, come to my session and find out how you can shift that and make the mindset be part of your secret sauce.
Exactly. I love that. And I think this is a friendly call to action for anyone who's watching, that I think organizations should really also invest in this kind of training. Of course, the theories is important, you know, absolutely. But there are some certain things that are like intangible when we're talking about minds and when we're talking about energetics. And I think that we need to invest in that. We need to invest the time, because it really does affect either negatively or positively our personal lives and the work that we do. Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful. I'll share super quickly. It was 2020 pandemic. I was working with Human Canada, of course, and Giving Tuesday. Anyone who's in fundraising knows Giving Tuesday, right? Is the event of the year probably in fundraising. And we focus our angle that year was on fighting puppy mills, because there had been a shipment from puppies, something insane, like hundreds, I don't remember the exact number, coming from Ukraine. And a lot of them arrived dead or extremely sick. Most of them were, if I'm not mistaken, French bulldogs. And there was this article of this guy who purchased one, and the dog passed away, spent a lot of money in veterinary bills, etc. And I found him on Facebook. I reached out and I said, "Hey, we're Human Canada. We're doing a fundraising. This is the angle. Would you mind sharing your testimonial? No problem." And it was so beautiful to see the money coming in that day. I remember I didn't shower that day because I was glued to the computer. I didn't make my bed because I was just like watching the money come in, and it felt so good. And the money wasn't going to me, it wasn't going to my pocket, not at all. But it almost felt like that. It was so uplifting. And I was so grateful to see people giving, especially 2020, which was a challenging year. There was so much going on. Some people lost their jobs, etc. Oh, so it made my week, probably my month. Like, look, it's been over 4 years and I still talk about it. It impacted me so much.
I love that story. And really, if you substitute the word money for trust, right? The money to you when it came in, Natalia, was their trust in your organization
Yeah.
to do good. That's what you're talking about. So if money is a icky subject for you, substitute the word trust and go out and find lots of trust for the work you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love these shifts, these subtle shifts that you're suggesting for us. If we are getting all of these takeaways from you with this quick live stream, imagine, for anyone who's watching, honestly, imagine what you're going to get when you actually come to the Summit for Animals and you sit in on Jenny's workshop. By the way, this is a little parenthesis. Jenny is speaking on Sunday, April 27th, is what we call the pre-conference learning labs, sponsored by Edmonton Humane Society. And they're smaller sessions. They're more intimate, smaller groups. I know sometimes people can get intimidated by big conferences. Totally understandable. In these smaller rooms, you'll be safer, for lack of a better word. So you'll be able to ask your questions in a safe space. And yeah, it's just more personable. And I definitely invite you to please look through our schedule, read up on Jenny. her bio, trust me, what I said was this much. Somebody commented on LinkedIn, like, wow, what an impressive resume you have. And I agree. It was just this much. So actually, you can go to Jenny's website. I'm going to put it right here on the screen, and you can read more up on her and her work. Jenny actually is also a published author, as I said in the bio. So you have a book. I would love for you to tell us about your book. And you also have a podcast. Personally, I'm a big podcast fan. I listen to podcasts while I'm cleaning in my house, while I'm going to the gym, etc. I feel like it's a great way of learning. I'm very antsy, so I'm not necessarily a person who sits down to learn. I like to learn as I go. So podcasts for me are just perfect. So tell us about your book and your podcast.
Well, thank you so much for this platform. I feel like I can start with the podcast because it's actually called Underdog Leadership. How appropriate is this, right? And I will actually,
I
without taking
know.
too much time, I want to tell this story because I had this epiphany moment in Thailand, actually on the beach, watching this pack of dogs, the human nature or the sort of behavior of a pack of dogs, where this one little guy had this huge cut on the top of his head. It was so tough to watch. And the animals were kind of pushing him, they're kind of wild and feral, into the water, basically with the goal of drowning him. And I have never forgotten. Yeah, it was awful. I mean, I felt viscerally, and I couldn't do anything. The pack was too big. And I felt viscerally that my response in my body was, when if and when that dog survives that experience, they are perfectly positioned to lead because they know what it's like to have been an underdog in a situation. And I actually named the whole podcast
Hmm.
about this. I help number twos become number ones in work and life. And the podcast really focuses on leadership. There are some fundraising pieces too. My audience tends to be women. And I would often say that the profile is somebody who wants to be 1% better than yesterday. Don't care whether you want to be CEO of an organization, but if you want to be obsessed with self-improvement the way I am, check out the podcast. It's called Underdog Leadership, and you can find it everywhere. And the book, Natalia, thank you so much for the chance to talk about it, is called Embracing Ambition, Empowering Women to Step Out, Be Seen, and Lead. Because one of the other things I saw in the sector, particularly, was how women's voices weren't being heard at the table, and there were some specific reasons why that was happening. So the book marries the research about women's leadership and how they lead, which, by the way, spoiler alert, is different, not better or worse, just different, and the lived experiences of 12 women CEOs. And in the women CEO stories, they're all first person. They're all a moment in time. So it's like a leadership petri dish. And I love the combination of the research and the what it feels like to lead, rather than these back in my day when I was da da da. It's a very in the moment, very raw, very sincere inside look at what leadership feels like.
Nice. I love that. I'm putting the name right here. So again, the book is called Embracing Ambition, Empowering Women to Step Out, Be Seen, and Lead. And when I was reading up on your podcast, I think it's a great idea for people who, like you said, I love that number ones become number twos become number one. And I think maybe some people who are in entry level positions may feel intimidated, like, oh, I'm not a leader because I am not the executive director. I'm not a leader because I'm not the manager of blah, blah, blah. But maybe that is your ambition, or maybe it's not. Maybe, like you said, you just want to improve yourself. So this is an invitation for those people who don't have the title to still listen to it, because why not? You don't have to have a title. You don't have to be called the CEO, the executive director, the manager, supervisor to be a leader. I think you can start being a leader within your own peers, even if you have the same positions, right? Like in a
Well, how
workplace.
about this? You always must lead yourself. And so you always
I
have to
love.
make sure you're leading yourself. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I love that. See, so start with you. Like, don't even worry about your peers, or no, just start with by leading yourself. I love that. Wow, what a takeaway. I want to say as well, going back to the conference, and this is something that we just found out yesterday. we are 75% sold out. The conference is happening in just over 2 months. So April 27th, 28th, and 29th. April 27th, as I said before, is our pre-conference learning labs. That's where you're speaking. We have 6 learning streams that day. You are, of course, speaking in the leadership track. And then we have the 2-day conference where we have 4 concurrent sessions, and you can go in between back and forth sessions. We have farm animal welfare, we have sessions on marketing, we have sessions on community outreach, shelter medicine. I mean, the easiest thing is for you all watching to go to the website, it's humanecanada.ca. You can read up on the sessions, you can read up on the speakers. And one of the great things, Jenny, that we hear from our conference attendees after the conference wraps up every year is they really, really value the connections that they make at the conference. Of course, the sessions and the education, absolutely, that's why they come. But it really is, there's so much power in those kind of random conversations that just happen while you're waiting in line to get food, while you're going into your next session room. So this is also that you're a speaker, you're a leader, but I'm sure you're going to make connections yourself. Is there anything in particular that you're excited about? Seeing that this is your first time speaking at the Summit for Animals?
Well, I mean, this is probably not the answer you're looking for, but it's Montreal. I mean, who doesn't love to go to Montreal? Okay.
Yeah, would love
So
to.
start with the Montreal part. And then the second part, I've always grown up with animals. So I have no doubt that I will meet some kindred spirits in the hallway. And I echo that, Natalia. Like every time I go to a conference, and obviously I'm usually on the stage. So I people come up and find me. But I find it's the
Mm,
casual, oh, what are you using for this? And what are you using for that? And what system are you using on that? And all that sort of, I don't know what you call it, like knowledge passed in the bathroom is kind of some of the most powerful stuff.
mm,
And it'll also, if you're thinking about, like I said, being leaderly, figuring out where your next opportunity is for growth at work. Like sometimes I find I go to conferences to go, oh, like right now I'm like, oh, I know nothing about AI. This is why I need to be here. I need to put that on my professional development plan. So I'm really looking forward to, I don't know a lot about shelter medicine, but I'm very interested. I'm hoping I get to do some of the cross pollination into the shelter medicine stuff because it seems to me that, being a good shelter contributor, making sure that shelters are run well. I've now recently learned that there's a lot being done to manage that. And make sure the animals have all their shots and all their vaccinations and etc. is just good management of our cities. That's something I'm thinking a lot of, and I hate to see animals that don't have homes. I'm not going to lie. Um, so yeah, that's me, and it's a great time of the year. End of April is going to be nice-ish in Montreal, and I'm close by. I'm in Ottawa, so I'm intending to drive up, and I'm taking it all in.
Yay, I love that. And hey, I don't blame you for your answer. I am very excited about Montreal too. I love Montreal, Montreal bagels. It's such a beautiful city. I feel like it's being in Europe within Canada. It's so European. I love that. And speaking of Montreal, real quick, I'll say our city host sponsor, Montreal SPCA, they're doing shelter tours. They're complimentary. For example, Jenny, if you want to learn more about shelter medicine or how a shelter runs, sign up for one of their tours. Spots are limited. There are different dates and times, but it's going to be great. People usually do love when we partner with the local humane society or SPCA to offer these shelter tours because they like to have a behind the scenes look that they would otherwise not have access to. So lots of other conference activities. We have a yappy hour, we have a soiree, we have a social so people can get together. There's a lot. Like it's a fantastic event. Obviously, I'm speaking from within, so I am biased, you could say. But even if I was outside of Human Canada, I would really be excited about attending this conference because the connections you make, the learnings, the opportunities, your professional development, it really is like nothing else. And it happens once a year in Canada. So it's an invitation, people. If you're watching this, please go to humancanada.ca/summit. That's SUMMIT and register. Don't wait because we're 75% sold out. Jenny, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic, enlightening session. People are saying that they're happy, they're excited to hear you speak. So thank you for giving us your precious time. And now people know where to find you, your website, your podcast, your book. And we will hear more from you when we see you in Montreal. Anything else to say before we
Merci beaucoup.
close? Great closing. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who watched live and who will watch the replay. We hopefully will see you in Montreal at the end of April. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye
Stay
bye.
safe. Take care.